Good evening and welcome to Legal Tech Live, episode 64. I'm here tonight with a special guest co-host who said yes, even though I did my last minute invite yesterday. Kimberly Bennett is joining me. Thanks, Kim, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate you jumping in. And our guests tonight are the team from Vaultie.io, or from Vaultie, and their website is Vaultie.io. We're talking about authenticated and transparent digital signatures, no more questioning intent or authentication on digital documents. We prove who signed the document, when they signed it, and what exactly they signed. Our guests are Dmitry Semenovsky and Meyer Mechanic. Welcome both. Thank you for being here. And please give us a little introduction on your background. Let's start with Dmitry as the CEO, and then Meyer as well as the COO, and give us a little introduction, a little background on you while I push us live into the Facebook group.
Sure. So I come from technical background, strictly technical, nothing about legal. It's just the path that led me to it. I started off in a cloud-based startup in Moscow. Then I moved to Canada and continued with a digital data room, a virtual data room. And that's how I met Meyer when we started discussing the possibility of building a data room on blockchain. And over the time, we figured out that we should go a different way and start doing the authenticated signatures. Meyer?
Excellent. And Meyer, how about you? What's your background?
My name is Meyer Mechanic, or Meyer Mechanic, I go by both. I was an investment banker with a company called Jacob Securities. We were the first people to be working in, at that point it was medical, now it's recreational marijuana space in Canada. And being the junior on that meant that I was building financials out for companies that had never had financials built out for them before. So I really gained an expertise in sort of building out models for startups at the investment banking level. And one of the problems that we always had was when you actually have a data room, once something's printed out, you couldn't trace the provenance of a document. So after I was done with banking, I'd done a bunch of consulting with startups, met Dmitry, and we started talking about using blockchain for data room purposes, which he just told you. And by the time we sort of got to the end of the feasibility study, we turned out that if you were to make a data room for an M&A deal, the cost alone, never mind profit or anything else, would be more than the typical cost of a deal. And that was just because of how high Bitcoin and Ethereum prices were. But in showing it to people, we really found a niche in digital signatures, digital identity on contracts, for the commissioning of documents, for wills, oaths, attestations, notarizations. So we've been focusing on that for about the last year. Product is in testing right now, and looking forward to telling you guys about it over the next 45 minutes or so.
Excellent. So you guys have come up with a contract. Well, it's not really contract authentication, I guess, though it could become a contract authentication in the future. But the way you had, when Meyer reached out, he had pitched it to me as essentially authenticating or notarizing digital documents, digital signatures. So tell us a little bit about the product. We are now live in the Facebook group. So anybody joining us in the Facebook group, our guests tonight are Vaultie and digital signature authentication and notarization.
So I can
please
tell you a little bit more about
dive
that.
in.
So we decided that, we've done our research on what should be the next evolutionary step of the digital signatures. So we had the wedding signatures, we had DocuSign and DocuSign, all kinds of digital signatures and digital markings. And we're now at the point when blockchain technology and these emerging open standards, which are called verifiable credentials, they're kind of playing very well together. And this, how we can issue something like a digital credential that represents your physical one, let's say your driver's license or passport, in a digital form that is autonomously verifiable without your project, without your ecosystem on blockchain by any other different vendor. So we thought that our users can be, well, when into an initial scheme, your issuers are organizations and your holders are regular people. So what if we just switch their spots? Like users become issuers, and the credentials that they issue is the digital signatures. It's the fact and the evidence of them signing the documents. Then we moved a little bit further and thought of, okay, but all of these private public keepers, they're still subject to compromisation because you only rely on password. And we decided to add the facial recognition, and we decided to store the facial biometric in that signature. So no matter what happens, you still have that digital certificate, and it's verifiable through blockchain, and that contains all your data, including your picture at the moment of signature.
So what it really boils down to is that traditional digital signatures are amazing for businesses because a business in itself is an ethereal representation. When we talk about people, it lacks trust. And the problem with that is when we're doing it, we know that it works on something called an economic identity. So it says, I have an email address. That email address is linked to my Facebook account, my bank account. So I can tell that, Kim is exactly who she says she is. The problem is I can't tell that.
Right.
Because when Kim's in front of her computer, anyone who has access to her password or maybe knows her backup questions can sign things. So for that reason, in Canada and in a lot of states in the US, notarizations, wills, oaths, and things can't be signed digitally. So by using those blockchain links, by using verified credentials, and by using facial recognition at the time of, I can say that there was no doubt that Kim was in front of her computer at that time. So we know now that, Kim signed this oath to appear on this podcast and was there at the time, at the place, during the time. And that allows us to sort of have a little bit more gusto when we're trying to prove the validity of a digital signature in court for sensitive stuff.
And Kim, I went through a little bit of a demo beforehand. Mm-hmm. So basically what I do is I, for simplification purposes, I take a picture like I would a profile picture, and I show my ID, I take a picture of my face, and when I'm joining, and then when you go to authenticate the signature later on, you have to authenticate your facial features once again by taking a new picture that is compared to the one that you do when you join Vaultie. Is that a good summary there, guys?
Yeah. So the only thing that I would add is when you take the photograph of the driver's license and the photograph of yourself, we're comparing those photographs to make sure that you are who you are in the driver's license. And we're checking to make sure that that driver's license is in fact a real authentic driver's license. And that's actually a third-party software that we use. So
okay.
That's what I was going to ask, actually. I was interested in trying to figure out how does it all come together? Because I actually could see how many great uses, even for businesses actually, where this would be a better way, where you have businesses that are scared of, moving into e-signatures, even though you want them to, and it happens in so many ways when it's a bigger deal. Sometimes they don't like that. So I could even see, clearly for the individual, but also to replace what our current e-signature tools are, or amplify, what's already out there.
Yeah, you're 100% right. It's actually fully legal to sign your mortgage in Canada digitally. No bank will let you do it.
Yep. Yeah.
And hopefully there's a vertical there for us down the road, but we don't know yet.
And tell us a little bit, guys, about the difference between what I'm used to, maybe what Kim's used to, our DocuSigns and our Hello signs and that type of thing right now. But that is reliant on my email address. And so the difference being now you're now making your authentication based not on my email address, but now you've got my government issue ID and my face, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. But we also have your cryptographical keys with which you will sign the digital certificates. So in this case, we are not only proving that, okay, it was indeed signed, and there is a cryptographical proof, we can tie it to a real person, to a real human being.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
With
So,
spatial identification.
And what they showed me is the date, time, and I was able then to go and also take a QR code and view the actual contract that was signed. So, and this is saved where? In Vaultie's database?
No, not actually. It's stored on blockchain. It's stored partially on your document. And we currently provide the pictures of the faces, but we're also looking forward to incorporating that into that QR code as an authentic and autonomous digital credential that travels with the document. So we don't store that private data. We allow user to share the contract with other people. And if you're allowing them to read the contents, why can they read it from the QR code from the original copy and verify who signed that? So it will be stored on the piece of paper that is subject for authentication, in order to leave the privacy with the user and let them manage whoever they want to show this document to.
Yeah. So they'll have a key for that. They'll have a digital key or digital key for that.
That QR code will be a digital certificate that's publicly verifiable, so you don't need a key.
Don't need
because
a key.
you want to present it to anyone, and they should be able to verify that. Just earlier today, I had a problem and a use case like that.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So when we're thinking about, I guess like Nick was saying, like our traditional way of thinking about e-signatures, and you send it, you get it back, you get the final document to your email with the page on, the back page that gives you all the authentication, so we know it's verified by an email. Can you show us or explain to us high level what that process is? I get how we can get our picture taken, but now if I'm an actual user wanting to use this in my business or for my signing of a will, how would that work? And what is that experience like?
Yeah, so the way it would look like with us would be the main user, so let's say you're using it for your business, you would log in, you would upload, let's say, a PDF of your document. Mm-hmm. You'd be able to drag out signature fields, just like any other sort of digital signature service from that angle. And then you'd be able to send it to any email address, or if you have multiple signatories, multiple email addresses. And they would receive an email saying, you've been invited to sign a document on Vaultie. They would have to come in, they would have to pass the authentication as well. So we'd be taking a photograph of their driver's license, we'd be taking a photograph of them. And then when they click to sign, we'd be taking another photograph of them, and they'd be inputting their passwords again. And we would be time stamping that and everything, and those references get written to chain. Okay. So it'd be very similar to everything else. And then just circling back to Dimitri's point earlier, because we're giving the user total autonomy of their data, that's the most secure place to have it, mm-hmm. right? You don't want to necessarily trust a company with your important documents. So if you have access to that, if you can control that, that's better than anything else. And then with the QR codes underneath, obviously, if you're taking a notarized document somewhere, those need to be verified. Mm-hmm. The process for verifying a notarization, at least in Ontario, I know it's different state to state, takes about 4 days. Right. We're doing that now in minutes. Okay. So we're taking a lot of costs out, we're taking a lot of time out of there. And suddenly when you're in a rush for things, or when things are really important, let's say traveling with a child on your own, we have that done a lot quicker.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. Kim, I don't know what it's like in Georgia, but last time I was in working in a law firm, it was to get something notarized. We had the notary there. You had to present the ID in person, and you had to sign in person in front of that. And you usually had to have a witness of some sort other than the notary. Is Atlanta any different?
Yeah, in Georgia, I'm trying to the last time I did it. Yeah, well, Atlanta too, but yeah, definitely. It's trying to find the person who can do it, or you're like, oh, who is someone a notary here? Can you come down and notarize it? So it's so many steps just to get the person before you even get the documents, and then having all the right people around, it does extend any document that you need to be signed. It extends that process in so many ways that I can imagine this would save time, save anxiety when you need that type of document done. And like you said, honestly, back to the banks, there are so many areas of law that we can do e-signatures legally, but they refuse to accept it. So I could see just from just getting a notarization to even the types of documents that don't necessarily need it, but don't allow it because they want an actual ink signature.
So on the cost savings, I just want to run through a quick case that we talked to a wills and estates lawyer about it. They had to send a document out of country for a secondary notarization. And I'm going to talk in Canadian dollars, so just knock it down by 30% for talking US dollars. But to have the doc review and the notarization done was $150 in time. To courier it to Cyprus, which was the country that we're talking about, it was $150 each way, first class mail. Whatever consulate magic happened was another $75. And then for every sort of certified copy was an extra $35. So by the time we got to the end of this document, we're talking about $600.
And how many days was that?
I don't want to know.
Okay.
I know at least 4.
Right.
But probably longer.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. A question comes from the group. Vahid Reza asks just a quick question. Are you using a public ledger blockchain or public ledger / blockchain is the question?
Yes, we do. We use Ethereum blockchain for that.
Ethereum blockchain. Okay, good. Yeah, Mary, it sounded like you had something, another anecdote on that will from Cyprus, or the trust from Cyprus.
Oh no, that was just to give you guys an idea of sort of where the cost savings are. There's a ton of stories that we get like that though. A big one that we see a lot when we've talked to immigration lawyers is people traveling with their children. Mm-hmm. If you want to travel with your child as a single parent, you need a notarized letter from the other parent.
I didn't even think of that.
When it actually gets checked, I was talking to a lawyer about it. It said it took him 4 days to check it. God forbid something terrible was about to happen. 4 days isn't enough time to prevent that. You need that authentication very quickly.
That makes sense. That's a use case that you guys need to be touting, that one. I didn't even think about that because I don't have kids that I'd be traveling with. So tell us, you mentioned before that you guys are in a legal tech accelerator. Tell us a little bit about that. How long, when was Vaultie established? Generally, we do very, very early stage. And so how long have you guys actually been established here?
We established, Dimitri founded the company as a university project in 2017. And that was the Digital Data Room project. And I was involved as a supervisor on that. We moved it towards digital signatures in, let's say, the end of 2018 and reincorporated, or federally continued, as we're calling it up here, in 2019. So we've been building this for a little less than a year.
Okay.
Outright. And the accelerator we are in has been the gas in our tank since May. We are really blessed. We're in an accelerator called the Legal Innovation Zone. It's at Ryerson in Toronto, and it's part of the law program that they're developing up there for that school. And it's 14 all legal tech companies, all doing different things. Literally everything from knowledge management within large firms to litigation coaching for self-representatives. There's a lot of really great guys in there, and it's really great for building that community because as founders, it lets us talk about founder problems when we have them. Particularly because we all come out of different strengths. For the community, it's great because lawyers who are interested in legal tech have somewhere to go. And that means that we also have the pulpits to talk and to have those conversations about how we move legal tech forward in Canada and in the States. We've gotten some of those as well.
And that would bring me, that's awesome that you're in the accelerator. That would bring me then to where do you see marketing this initially? Are you hitting both Canada and the US, or do you think you'll start? And we have Megan Cornell is in the group here. She she is a lawyer in Canada, as I recall, and she says this sounds like a great option. She's looking forward to learning more. So ask any questions you want, Megan. So are you gonna push the product in the U.S. or in Canada first?
Pushing the product as a digital signature service first
Mm-hmm.
can happen in both.
Okay.
As far as digital signatures go, we know that that's something that works on both sides very easily. When it comes to notarizations, oaths, affirmations, every state, every province has different hurdles. So we're trying to figure out sort of where the best opportunity to launch those initiatives are, and figure out sort of, if we take the strictest rules and apply to those, hopefully we can create a domino effect where it gets knocked down in a couple others. Vermont, Nevada, Michigan, I think it's Arkansas and one other right now, have legalized remote notarizations. So that revolves around a video chat like we're having right now,
Mm-hmm.
with an electronic signature. So if we added that platform on, we'd be able to work down there. We may go about it slightly differently. So we'll see sort of what takes off and where we have opportunities for it.
Very cool.
Sorry. Have you identified which states you think are the most restrictive as the ones that you might potentially use from a strategic perspective to go after first?
Really great question. Because so many states haven't started looking at remote notarization, it's sort of tough to tell. My assumptions based on what I've read are it's probably going to be New York or California. More likely California, because California started putting in regulations against facial recognition. And that's a big problem that other facial recs are having, because it's facial recognition without consent.
Okay.
At the end of the day, if you don't know what's happening with that facial rec data and you're not in control of it, if someone steals a credit card, you can replace a credit card. If someone steals, your biometric information, it's different.
Mm-hmm.
So we're very, very careful about how we handle that data. And we're very, very careful about making sure that we have consent every step of the way, and making sure that our users knows, making sure that our whole community knows that, this data is in your hands when we store it, because the only person who's going to keep your information secure at the end of the day is you. You shouldn't have to trust another company on that. And that's where the verified credentials come into play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you envision some of those barriers with privacy, with things that are happening now, just out in the news, being a potential roadblock for adoption from individuals, since that is the target on the notarization side?
So
that's also a fantastic question. Sorry, Dimitri, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think that wouldn't be a big problem, actually, because since we are exploring the whole domain of self-sovereign identities, just to explain what it is, you use your own mobile device to keep all of your credentials, and only you decide whether or not to share it, or just present a proof of some fact without disclosing this fact. So since we're talking about storing all of the data on your device only, then we shouldn't get any kind of issues on privacy side. And besides, we should be actually win, because we don't have the ability to steal or trade any personal data.
Yeah, I mean, the key is communication. And if people understand what we're doing with it, how we're dealing with it, how it's in your hands and your power, we can do that. I think the problem that a lot of these facial recognition lawsuits that have come up, particularly against Facebook, have been about they're recognizing people without their consent behind it. So if you say upload a picture of you and Nick, and it recognizes Nick, well, Nick might not want to be recognized.
Right.
And if that's not in your privacy policy, if you're not dealing with that appropriately, that's scary.
Right.
We're trying to be very open that we're not doing that. Everything we're doing is with consent. We're storing it with you, so you can have trust in the fact that when you are doing something that is sensitive, the power is still yours to, wipe out that information, to handle that information, to give that information to someone else who may need to verify it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's probably so true. Like the key is communication with any, like, I think at the stage where technology is going at this point, communication is going to be key because what we think of the possibilities are beyond, I think, most people's imagination. So like now that as the one developing it, being able to be that transparent and, you know, put it as upfront as possible so that people understand it and can see how it actually works in real time, I think will, like you said, reduce all those roadblocks and allow to be adopted faster.
It really is what I recall from law school and law clerking is the informed consent that we learn about in negligence matters and medical malpractice matters is now just needs to be applied to technology and privacy matters.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
I agree.
it's in so much more than just what we're doing, right? If I can take a look at a security camera and recognize somebody's face on there, you know, is that an invasion of their privacy? Right? If I know that, you know, every morning at 7 a.m. somebody walks around the block and goes into the convenience store and buys his coffee, you know, that's not the kind of stuff that we want to be using facial recognition for. That stuff gets dangerous. And there are people that are doing that out there. And that's why we're trying to be very positive on how we're doing what we're doing to make sure that, you know, you can use these tools for good and we have to use them for good. Otherwise it can get really scary.
Good. We have a question from Mark Palmer. Mark is with the Illinois. It's To Civility is the name of it. Is that Kim? Do you remember the actual? I think that's the Illinois Professional Responsibility Group. I never remember the exact name. I know them as To Civility.
I'm gonna quote it wrong, but yes, that's the right way I describe it too.
Okay. And he says, what options might you foresee in states like Illinois? Illinois has no provisions permitting remote notarizations or wait and see laws and catch-up laws. So, did I butcher that question enough? Do you need me to reread that because I butchered it so badly?
No, I understand where you're coming from. I'm just trying to think back because when I was going through the maps on sort of what's adopted, I believe, and I would need to double check this on my actual map because I've color coded it, that in January of 2020, Illinois has a remote notary law going into effect.
Okay.
That's one, but I mean, there's so many states that don't. So I don't want to necessarily just talk Illinois. Let's talk everybody. It's about education, right? It's about aligning interests and making sure that, you know, we can declutter the system. And I think that regulatory bodies are waking up to that now, particularly from an access to justice point where you can process so many more documents so much quicker. You can declutter court systems because I no longer have to prove that a document is real, that we're starting to sort of see movement in there. Different states are obviously going to take different amounts of time and they're going to want different sort of security levels as we go there. But it starts in the legal tech community saying this is something that's going to make our lives a lot better. This is going to get lawyers to see more clients. This is going to get lawyers to have less, you know, mundane task work, which means that we can sort of work through that backlog a little better. And if we start it in the legal tech community, we start going out into the aligned groups, you know, the law societies, the bar associations and things like that, we can start making those changes as we wise up to them. But it's not an easy road and it's never a short road, but some places have woken up to it already and they're starting to play around with it. And as more get there, you know, we're going to build a critical mass to the point that we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would want to jump into the access to justice issue that you brought up was something I was actually really interested in hearing you talk about. So I'm glad you did. And so one of the things I'm thinking about with the facial recognition, I mean, most people, we know cell phones are highest usage, right? So most people will have a cell phone, you know, across a range of socioeconomic statuses. What are some alternative ways though? I mean, maybe there aren't, some doesn't have it, right? But they need something like this, like, how do we envision being able to give them access to this too, so that they can move through the system, through a process, through a will signing, whatever that they need to have happen that maybe it's being prevented because they don't have the traditional things we have today?
So really great question.
Okay, hold on. I got to stop everybody right there because that is the third time that Meyer has said, great question. And from Kimberly, not from me. And I want to make this clear to everybody that this is the exact experience I had watching Kimberly, which is why I'm smiling so much. The exact experience I had when I watched Kim speak last year or the year before at a conference. And I was at the back of the conference. I think I was sitting next to Mark Palmer at the time, and I'm doing my, like, all right, I'm kind of tuned out in the afternoon. And all of a sudden, she starts talking about great stuff and totally dominates the conversation. And I'm perked up, I'm paying attention, and I'm impressed. Keep going with the great question. I'm gonna look over here and see who's asking questions in the background.
Thank you.
I'd just like to listen to a podcast of Kim just asking questions.
I know, it's impressive, I assure you.
Even without answers, but in terms of access to justice, so smartphone penetration rate in North America is 98%. At least that's what sort of Rogers, AT&T, their financial reports all seem to say. So we're talking about a very small subset that might not have access to a smartphone. But that being said, we sign our contracts on laptops when we're doing our test stuff. There are other places to do it. You can do it within your law office as well. So there are sort of areas on there. But it's brought up a real question when we talked about access to justice, because some of the people have been worried that over time, as we start automating documents, as we start doing digitization of documents, that clients may not be able to ask the questions that they need to of their lawyer to get the information that's relevant. And that's being contrasted against how much more can be processed for people who might not have been able to afford a lawyer before, or who might not have been able to sort of get access to those services before. So those are modern issues that we're wrestling with. In terms of smartphone penetration, I think it's high enough that it's a rare case, but it's a case worth noting, and one that I wish I had a better answer for right now.
No, but I mean, the reality is it is high usage, and there's alternative ways to authenticate so that you're done, right? Like, it's just, okay, we can solve that problem through design. It's just saying, okay, it's there. How do we, I mean, in an industry where 70-80% of the people aren't being served right now, if we go to 2%, I feel like that's a win in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's a huge increase in the access to justice. And Meyer, Mayor, excuse me, I have to tell you, I'm really impressed. You've done, you missed some of this when we were talking beforehand, Kim, but he had he spent, what was it, last summer reading the 50 notary laws of all 50 states or something like that. You guys have done some significant research and put in some significant market research to work on this project. And it's really impressive for me to see that. We don't always see that in legal tech.
I mean, Dimitri does as much, if not more, half the time. Like, it's amazing some of the stuff that he's looking into, because even when we're talking about verified credentials, the standards are written, but they're becoming bona fide more and more every day. So to be able to stay on top of the tech and then understand how it moves into legal, we're not able to do this if we're not a team. And he does amazing work on that all the time.
That's fantastic. So tell us then, is anybody actively using your software at this time?
We haven't launched yet. We're testing right now with, we're going through user testing right now. So if the community wants to try it out, I'd be happy to, hop on the horn with them and walk them through how to sign contracts. We're right now testing with users and a couple of lawyers. We're going to start testing with a firm if everything goes to plan next month. And the idea is to actually launch the digital signature platform in January.
Okay. All right, good.
I love it. I'd love to test it, so put me on that list.
And Dimitri, the email did finally come through while we were, the email for my test finally came through while we were sitting here.
That's great.
that I believe
it works. not always with the speed of light, but it still works.
Well, I don't think that's you. I'm pretty sure that's my Gmail. That sometimes I get a slow response there. So you hope to launch in January. When does your time with the accelerator end?
We've got 2 years.
2 years. Okay.
Which we started in May. And ideally, if we're building the community that we're hoping that we're building, underneath this accelerator, but with this accelerator at the same time, hopefully that relationship, stays going strong forever, because they're doing such good work up here in terms of being able to get really good ideas into development, getting them in front of lawyers so we can actually see how they work as we go forward. I'd shout out all 14 companies, but it wouldn't be fair because I'd forget one.
And that's okay. And you can send us names of really exciting ones that you really like, and we can interview them as well. We try and do an international here.
Yeah.
So how about financing? Have you guys taken on any investment at this time?
Yeah, we took on $210,000 over the summer, and that was to mostly handle our third-party facial verification. We got a special deal on that, so we took care of that early. It gives us burn through the first part of next year, which is really great. Ideally, we're going to have to fundraise again at some point, in the next 6-7 months. But my approach to financing, and Dimitri's been great in sort of allowing us to do this, is be very careful with how and when we finance, because if you go out and raise a ton of money and then a month in you find out that what you have doesn't actually work, well, now you've wasted everybody's money. So we were trying to sort of set goals and raise along those goals. So the first bit was, let's get ourselves into production. The next bit is going to be, okay, let's try and sell this thing. And then whatever bit comes after that is going to be, how can we scale this and adopt it for people to use? So in stages as we prove ourselves, because nobody likes losing money in startup investing.
Do you have an idea of what that that point is for you to know that it's time to scale? So now you're about to move into test mode, right? And get people on to get the adoption going. Do you have an idea of when that point will be?
I think when the point comes that Dimitri and I can't sleep anymore. We're already at the point where we're working past midnight most nights, but if it gets too much later, I think his wife's going to make sure that we race earlier.
And that's fair. That's fair.
But let's see how it sells. Let's see how it goes through. And then if we knock off one of these hurdles and let's say get notarization to be piloted in a state or a province, that's probably grounds to scale very quickly.
Okay. So certain user base and potentially like a pilot program in a particular jurisdiction.
Yeah, I would think it looks like that.
Okay.
It's actually interesting because when we talk about which jurisdictions, Canada's a really big place. So we had a conversation inside about what it would look like if we got a pilot in, let's say, the Yukon Territories. The Yukon Territories has 30,000 people who live in it. The top 15 lawyers in the Yukon, by hours billed, all live in Vancouver, British Columbia. Totally different state. It's just because of sort of the lack of it. So they're in desperate need of sort of something like remote notarization. But at the same time, that might not actually be big enough for us to sort of say, okay, that's enough that we can scale on. So let's see where it goes.
And tell us then how, and we do have another question from Vahid in the group here, but tell us how you will it be subscription based? Will it be per use? How are you going to do that?
Dimitri, I feel like you haven't talked in a while. Do you want
to? Sure. So as we progress in our research of how to make it more and more economically efficient, because blockchain is an expensive toy to play with. Mm-hmm. So, and you need to really know how to cook it well, so it's not so it doesn't eat your budget, like the whole of your budget and the whole of your margins. So we have come to a solution when we can make it affordable. So it probably will consist of 3 or more subscription plans in the near future. Before that, we thought it would be a system where you can purchase individual contracts and you can add more signatories as you go. If you need, let's say, sign a big petition, like a large petition, it's 40 or 100 people, you don't have to pay for the additional signatories to sign, not for the document itself. Still doable. You can just buy one and go with one. we think that as we go and as our prices get lower, we can offer a subscription or even maybe a free plan compared to what other companies do have, so people can try with 1 or 2 contracts to begin with, and then decide after they reach a certain limit if they want to continue and use it or they're not satisfied and they will just come off. There, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so it'll be pay per use to start. Ideally, from the lawyer base, we're ideally going to structure it in a way that it can be billed out as a disbursement in the event that you need to. We're going to have a subscription plan as well, which can offer 2 different speeds. One of sort of the follies of writing to blockchain is the speed in which you write a contract to a blockchain costs different amounts of money depending on sort of what's going on in the day, because the prices to write fluctuate similar to a stock market. So at its lowest level, we can guarantee something's written within 6 hours. At its highest level, we can guarantee it's written within 30 seconds. And there's going to be a little bit of sort of price discrimination on what you need at that point.
Okay.
Likely wait 24 hours for a will. You might not be able to wait 24 hours for, a real estate closing.
Right.
So.
Right. All right. And Vahid asks more of a technical question, and I think this is what you were alluding to, Dimitri. He says, what is the gas cost for posting data on Ethereum blockchain? And will the upcoming hard fork to Constantinople change that?
So, first of all, the upcoming hard fork is not to Constantinople, it's to Istanbul.
Okay.
The Constantinople hard fork occurred in last February, as I know. So it actually affects the pricing, but there was a proposal that could potentially lower the amount of gas used, and a different mechanism has been introduced. However, it didn't get accepted into that upgrade. And a couple of other upgrades related to smart contracts and storage of information have been implemented. It will only increase the price of the transaction in the amount of gas. If we're talking about how much the unit of gas costs, it's always different depending on what speed do you want to get. So if you're willing to pay, it's basically an auction model. The highest bidder gets in first. The lowest bidder has to wait until he gets accepted if no one else wants to participate in the block. So,
okay.
So I hope it answers the question, and I'm willing to tell more.
Yeah. To put that into American dollars, to sign a 2-party contract right now, like this time of night, it's going to cost us 11 cents.
Okay.
If we're going to do that, let's say tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., it's probably going to be closer to, let's say, $1.50. And the reason behind that is gas prices, as they go up, it's worth 1 millionth of an ether. So those prices sort of scale. However, we're working on ways to make this blockchain agnostic, so it might not necessarily need to be Ethereum based.
Okay.
To allow us to lower the cost.
And would you guys, for your own personal, for the sake of the company, would you have to factor in that transaction cost at the time that it was authenticated?
So that's a fascinating question about auction economics.
Say it's a great question. I haven't had one of those yet.
It's a great question. I think fascinating is almost as interesting and great. So the way that we've priced ourselves right now is we wanted to make it a flat cost for lawyers to use this. So it does eat into our gross margins a little bit, but we're priced in a position when we do launch that ideally this is dealable. Plus, if we solved that other issue and made this agnostic, it's going to be way cheaper anyways. But one of the things that we were sort of adamant on as we were developing this out is that we didn't want to bring the complexity of the blockchain into a lawyer's office because they have enough problems on their plate already.
Yeah, and it could look really weird for you as a customer, right? Why are my fees per doing the same thing changing every time I do it? I'm doing 10 of these a week. Why are the costs different each time?
Yeah, the analogy we like to use is we treat Ethereum like an electronics company may treat gold, or like a jeweler may treat gold, right? The price is going to change all the time.
Right.
The ring price doesn't change when it's done.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think as the practitioner too, it's so I don't bill out for things like that, right? Like I just do it as a cost of doing business to provide a better service. So there would be some great to be able to plan and forecast. I would love to see a pricing model that allowed for less fluctuation, right? Maybe a usage thing, like you were saying, but as the closer you get to that, I could see that even increasing adoption. So
yeah, like we couldn't go to any enterprise client and said, what's this going to cost us? And said, we don't know.
Right.
That's not fair to a client. That's not fair to anyone else. It's one of the challenges of doing business on the Ethereum blockchain, but it's also one that, we know that we can take care of if we handle it right.
Yeah. And I would say it probably is even worse for smaller too, because like their margins are so much smaller to deal with that. If that happens, you're like, well, I'm just going to go use the thing I'm used to because it's so standard and it prevents them from really going to the better product, which is what you're building.
So gentlemen, it's been about 40 minutes here. Anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to make sure gets into the recording?
Yes. I want to throw a big shout out again to my co-founder for doing this on his birthday.
Oh, I didn't know it was a birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Dimitri.
Originally, it was supposed to be just me, and then he changed his plans up to do this. So,
yeah, wow. And I must apologize to Dimitri because there was an early morning mistweet which brought the wrath of Dimitri upon me in the kindest way, and just, hey, I'm the CEO and Mayer's the COO, and I say that jokingly, and so at that point I was like, oh, come on in. And so I didn't realize it was his birthday when he invited him on, but he was very gracious to accept.
Yeah.
So.
People usually confuse us because we're talking usually to different people, and we make introductions, and we both are treated like CEOs sometimes. Like
right.
When Meyer reaches out and I reach out, that happens all the time. Like,
well,
Meyer's son he gets that like 3 or 4 times
a week. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for correcting me, and I thank you for making it here on your birthday. And I hope your wife is not ultra upset with us for this. How do people contact the Vaultie team? How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can take a look at our website if you want to subscribe to the newsletter. That is Vaultie, VAULTIE.io. You can email either Dimitri or I. Dimitri is Dimitri at Vaultie.io. I am Meyer, MEYER, at Vaultie.io. We're on Twitter at Vaultie.io. And obviously we're on LinkedIn as well, because it's hard to build a professional community without that. And any way you reach out, we'd be glad to talk to you. We'd be glad to help you out with whatever you need from that angle.
Excellent. Excellent. And Kim, how does everybody get in touch with you if they'd like?
Sure. Well, you can reach me. I'm always on Twitter at KBennett Law, or you can reach my law firm, kbennettlaw.com, or my other offer, modernlegalcollective.com.
Excellent. Excellent. So I want to thank you all for being here. Kim, thank you for joining. It was fantastic. That was 3-1 on the great questions, and I had to twist Meyer's arm on that, and I'm okay with that. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here tonight. Don't disappear after we stop. Thank you for all the great questions. Vahid, Sajish, thanks for showing up. Travis, Mark Palmer, Megan Cornell, thank you guys for all being here and asking questions and participating, and we will see you in 2 weeks for episode 65. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you for having us.
Bye.